Nicola. I'm the founder of Happy Home Learning UK, and I've created this little activity tin to help make maths easier, more active and fun. I want to share with you the end of year expectations for reception year 1 and year 2. So I've discreetly colour coded the cards: red for reception, yellow for year 1 and green for year 2. This product is designed to help you understand those expectations so you can offer appropriate challenge, which is so important for your child's enjoyment of maths, for their confidence, their self-esteem and their independence. So if your child does attend a school, then what I recommend you do is just ask your child's class teacher roughly which area of the curriculum they're best suited to. Because you could have a year 1 child who is struggling a little with maths and would benefit from recapping on the reception colour-coded cards to give their confidence a boost. Or you might have a child partway through year 1 who's actually excelling in maths and therefore needs an extra level of challenge in order to keep them motivated and engaged, in which case the green colour cards might at times be really suitable for them. However, what I wouldn't do initially is tell your child about those different colour codes, okay? What you can do is sometimes present them like this. You can ask your child, would they like a challenge? So if you have a child in the end of reception who seems to be doing quite well with their maths and enjoys maths, you might want to ask them, would they like a more challenging activity? In which case you can slip a few of the yellow colour coded cards in. Okay, or if you have a child who's tired or lacking in confidence, you can track back, as I said before. Now, the activity tin is supplied with these 4 translucent dice, which also help to make learning novel because we don't have these kinds of dice in school. So the feedback I get from schools is that the dice are really, really appealing. I recommend, if you're trying to encourage your child to participate in a maths activity, that actually what you do is you don't describe this as maths at all. Avoid sitting at the table with it and talking about doing a little bit of homework or doing a little bit of maths learning. What you can do is simply leave it out for them to discover. Leave the dice available, or simply allow your child to discover you playing through with some of the activities at home. A further top tip I would recommend to help you get the most out of the activity tin is to allow your child, when they first receive it, to have lots of opportunity simply to play with the dice. Another way that you can motivate your child to engage in maths learning is to catch them when they're in the mood for learning, when they're not overly tired. You know when they might be receptive to doing a particular activity. So storing this activity tin in a place where you can whip it out quickly for 5 minutes of reinforcement will be helpful. Perhaps in a glove compartment, a cutlery drawer, in your bag. You consider actually having it available away from the kitchen table and possibly taking it outside or on camping adventures, on holidays, having it in your bag so when you're stuck in a queue you can whip it out and learn together. And we know, don't we, that life is busy, so sometimes in order to get the most out of an activity and make it pleasurable, it can be about finding a time that suits you as a grown-up, a time when you're going to be enthusiastic, you're going to be confident and excited about doing this activity. So having it available to hand is really recommended. Another way that you Now, a lot of good maths learning involves understanding language and being able to use that and apply it in different situations. So the key maths language for your child to understand and use is highlighted in the relevant colour code on these cards. What you'll find in this activity pack is before the reception colour-coded cards, before the yellow colour-coded cards and before the green colour-coded cards, there is a QR code. Simply hover your camera over that code and you will receive some extra tips for how you can use that language in everyday situations. For example, on the playground, over a meal, on a walk. So you can intersperse stealthily maths into everyday situations and help your child understand the value of maths and actually learn without even realising. In order for children to acquire and understand new language, they need to hear that language repetitively and in lots of different situations. So that is why it's really useful when you're having story time with your child to read the same storybook or information book over and over again, maybe up to 10 times. So what I'm going to do now is share with you some ways to reinforce key maths language in these activity cards, but in different situations. Activity card number 3. So roll and say the number of spots on each dice without counting them. Now this is called subitising, and in class your child's teacher may refer to it as that, they may not. But that's understanding an amount without having to count it individually. So knowing that when you see those spots on a die, that is 4 and that is 6 without having to count or move items. What I recommend you do is next time you go for a walk, think of how many ways you can notice 3. Look at the 3 on the die and then see if you can find a cluster of 3 leaves or 3 sticks together or 3 stones, a cluster of 3 clouds. Maybe over dinner time, can you find a bunch of 3 grapes or 3 cherry tomatoes? Where can you spot 3? And leave them with that challenge. Activity card then, number 5, looking at greater and less than. The next time you have a meal with an amount of something on your plate, for example peas, you could consider counting those and thinking of who has the greatest number of peas and who has less peas on their plate. Young children benefit from actually touching and physically moving things quite a large distance or counting into a pot. And for other children, if it's a small amount and they can subitise, they'll just know that that's 5 and you have 4, and you can talk about how they have a greater number than you. You don't though always need to fire questions at your child. It can be as simple as using that language and thinking out loud yourself. So, oh, I really like peas. You've got 5 and I've got 4. You've got a greater number than me. Activity card number 9 is doubling. Now, to introduce that concept, you might want to link doubling with double-decker buses, or for example a double bed. You could talk about how a single bed fits 1 person, but when you add the same amount again, that makes 2, and a double bed is for 2 people. That's designed for 2 people to sleep in. I recommend that whenever you are cooking and you're looking at doubling your quantities, if you're hosting or maybe you're making cookies and you want to make double quantities, if for example the recipe requests 2 eggs, ask your child to think about double that amount and select those 4 eggs from the egg box to help you. Activity card number 14, looking at the term light. In reception we would cover the terms light, lightest and lighter, heavy, heaviest and heavier, so those comparing terms. And typically children seem to find that concept of heavy and using that term heavy a little bit easier. The term light doesn't tend to be used as much in their vocabulary. So next time you're on a walk, can you find a light feather? Can you find something lighter than a feather or heavier than a feather? Look at the tin, the dice, the cards. Which is the lightest? Which is the heaviest? How could we find out how much they weigh? Do they understand that we measure weight using weighing scales? And then a lovely bath time activity is to take a variety of things that are large, things that are small, things that are heavy, and things that are small, and explore, does it matter how big something is? Does that affect how it floats or how it sinks? That would be a very good science challenge for them that uses that language too. Are bigger things always heavier than smaller things? And you can play around. You can take giant boxes that you get through the post and you can make sure that there's very little in it. And then you can take a small box you get through the post and fill it with stones and just address that misconception that bigger things are always heavier than smaller things. Activity card 15 introduces the term sharing and equal. So equal meaning exactly the same, and sharing is how we introduce division. We don't use the term division in reception. But the next time you have friends over or little friends over, perhaps you could look at a snack that you have and consider sharing it equally between pots. So if, for example, you had 10 items and they had a little friend round, they could have a pot each, take the 10 items and say, 1 for you, 1 for me, 1 for you, 1 for me. And then notice how many they've got in each bowl. So 5 in one bowl, 5 in the other. Is that the same? Are those bowls equal? Is it fair? Well done for sharing accurately. Thinking about now the year 1 colour-coded cards, and this one is about shape. Now this is the language that we use to describe shapes, bearing in mind that in nursery they will have been taught to look for triangles, squares, rectangles, circles. They will have been on a shape hunt. We will have described shapes in junk modelling situations, in crafts when we've made shape pictures, and they're all things that you can continue to do in year 1 as well as in year 2. When your child is learning to count the faces of something like this die, it helps if they keep it still. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 flat faces on a die, okay? And then we talk about corners in a shape, and where two sides meet, they make a corner. And that can sometimes be called a vertex as well as children get older. So let's count then the vertices. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now this is a fat shape, it has height, but a flat shape would be something like a circle or a rectangle or a triangle that is drawn on a piece of paper, something that's completely flat. You might want to look at one of these cards and think about, is this a rectangle or isn't it? So it's flat. It does have 2 long sides, 2 short sides, so it appears to be a rectangle, but actually these are rounded. Now it's not so important about whether your child gets this right or not, but thinking out loud, modelling, being curious, I wonder if it's got rounded parts like this. Is it a rectangle or isn't it? Just model being curious. Estimating on card 24, that is a useful concept in Key Stage 2. Children increasingly, as they get older, will learn to estimate before they then work out a sum. So for example, if they were multiplying 22 by 24, they might make an estimate first, 20 times 20, and then compare that with their answer. It's really, really useful for them as they move through school. In the infants, it's really about encouraging children to have a concept of number. So you can start with small amounts. I wonder if I can estimate how many conkers I can keep in my hand on this walk, and whether I can hold more than you. You can look at estimating when you are measuring how many footsteps it might take to get to the nearest landmark. That can be motivating if you're encouraging your child to walk. And you can compare your estimate with a grown-up's estimate. Oh, I wonder if I will be able to get to the nearest gate or the nearest tree with a smaller number of footsteps than you can. You can make sure that your feet touch and do that accurately, or you could just stride out and then compare. And if you do something like that over and over again, you'd expect your child's answer to get more and more accurate. Don't worry if they come up with a random number like 1,000 and it ends up being 20 footsteps. Children love big numbers and to describe big numbers, but do it over and over again. Maybe choose the same landmark on your walk and see if they start to refine their estimate over time. You could estimate how many dice fit in that tin, or how many cards fit in the tin. And a lovely activity that you can do in the bath is to take plastic bottles and a plastic cup and estimate how many cups it will take to fill to the top. You can then, if you want to add an extra level of challenge, have a small cup and have a large cup. After they've done it a few times with the small cup, do they understand that their estimate should change when they start to fill the same size container with a larger cup? We want our children to be intrigued by maths and intrigued by number. So think about estimating all kinds of things. Oh, I wonder, model curiosity, I wonder how many hairs we've got on our head. Think about estimating time. I wonder how many hours it's going to take for us to reach our destination or our holiday destination. What might they like to estimate? Card 29 describes ordering. We can order from the smallest to the largest, from the largest to the smallest, heaviest to lightest, lightest to heaviest. If you're going to do that on paper, it's useful to order horizontally. So if you had the numbers, for example, for year 1, it might be 17, 70 and 7. Can they order from the smallest to the largest, but then vertically from the smallest to the largest and from the largest to the smallest? You can put those numbers on post-it notes and move them round, so they don't need to worry about writing the numbers and making a mistake. You can play around, and often those numbers 17 and 71 get mixed up, or 14 and 41, where the digits are reversed. So those are useful numbers to include when you're ordering. But we can order weight, we can order by size as well as by amount. So think about all the different ways that you could order. Perhaps you could order the height of everybody in your family and get excited about measuring people in your family and keeping a record on the wall as they grow. And noting that you're measuring in centimetres and measuring in metres as well when you're doing that is really helpful. The next time you're on a journey and you need to keep your child entertained, consider card number 34. So this is exploring the word total. What you could do is you could have a little clipboard or a hardback book and blue tack or clip a piece of paper to that, and encourage your child to keep a record of how many cars they see that are a particular colour, or if they like a particular make of car. And they could have a tally. There's an example of the tally in one of the cards. And then after they have completed that tally on the journey, perhaps one person in that car has a tally for a green coloured car and another one has one for the yellow coloured car. You can compare your totals. You can add up your tally, 5, 10, 15, encourage the counting of fives, and then work out who has the greatest number. On to the year 2 activity cards now. Number 35 talks about a game where you have to guess the number by asking questions. Now that is really quite a challenge for our little ones when they first start. I recommend that you do these things to introduce the game and make it easier. So firstly, what you want to do is encourage your child to pop a post-it note on your head with a number on, and you model asking the questions. So your questions could be, using the language on here, is it less than 10 or more than 10? Is it an even number or an odd number? Okay, and make sure that as you're doing that, you're pausing, you're giving them lots of time to answer. It can also be really helpful if your child has something called a 100 square or a number line. It could be as simple as a ruler or a tape measure in front of them. That can really help them to focus. And as well, when it's their turn then to guess the number that's on their head on a post-it note, it can be helpful to have the language on a sheet in front of them. So this is quite small. You might want to write that a little larger on a sheet of paper, and you can list even and odd next to each other, larger and smaller underneath. And talk about some of that language before you start, just to warm up their brains. Have you ever been bored of a board game with your child? The next time you play and you're moving around snakes and ladders game, instead of having one die, introduce 2 or more. And then look for the pairs of numbers that make 10. We call those the number bonds to 10. For example, it could be 5 add 5 if you've got 2 dice. It could be 4 add 6 or 6 add 4. And encourage your child mentally to remember those. In addition, you can look for doubles as well. So if you were to roll 2 dice and get a 3 and a 3, note, oh, that's one of our doubles. What's 3 add 3? Let's use our fingers, put them together and make 6. And that will help you move around the board more quickly, and it will help them apply their maths learning. The times tables are so important. At the moment, children are expected to sit a national times table test set by the government in year 4 because they underpin all aspects of learning. They're linked with fractions and decimals and addition and subtraction and problem solving. And the quicker that we can learn the times tables, the easier it is for our children to solve problems. We're lightening the mental load so they can focus on the words within a problem and apply their maths rather than just how to use their times tables. So card 42 is about the term multiply, and the other words we use for that are lots of and times. Now this uses the dice to teach you how to multiply by 2 and by 5. In year 1, children will have been exposed to counting in 2s, counting in 5s and counting in 10s. But then in year 2, we introduce the term multiplication and the concept, which is a bit more complex than that. So what you can do is take one die and have the number 2 always visible. Take the other die and roll that and then multiply the 2 together. So keep this one the same and change this. So they're just learning how to multiply by 2 up to 6 really quickly before you then introduce multiplying by 7, multiplying by 8, learning 9 times 2, 10 times 2, 11 times 2, and then 12 times 2. So you can break down learning the times tables in that way. Similarly, in year 2, we would be multiplying by 5. And eventually they will learn to count in 3s, but they're not necessarily learning the 3 times table in year 2, just learning to count 0, 3, 6, 9. Question 44 introduces the term difference, and initially we might talk about the difference in hair colour or the difference in clothes and things like that, but then we're looking at it as a maths concept and we're thinking of difference in terms of take away, and another word for that is subtract. So if you're building towers, you could talk about how, oh, I've got 6 in my tower and you've got 2. Oh, I've got 4 more than you. So we want our children to understand that they're then doing 6 subtract 2, 6 minus 2. What's the difference between 6 and 2? It's 4. Okay, so that is quite tricky. We find that children often understand addition much more easily than they do subtraction. So it's really useful to always practice counting backwards with your child from different numbers. And in year 2, that might be counting backwards from 98 in ones, or it might be counting backwards from a number like 105, because it can be tricky for our little ones to cross the 100, the 90, the 80, the 70 mark. So I'd really urge you, whenever you can, to build in opportunities to count backwards. I can remember at school finding fractions and time really tricky in year 3. It stays with you, doesn't it? So card 49 is about finding a quarter of a number. And in year 2, we want children to understand quarter and half. Now that doesn't just apply to things like pizzas. You tend to see in maths a lot of pizzas being separated into quarters and into halves. But when you are cutting up an orange into quarters, cut it up into 4 equal parts and give your child one and say, here's 1/4, that's 1 of 4 equal parts. Or cut it in half, that's 1 of 2 equal parts. Encourage them to have a knife and cut things up themselves. Involve them in that activity. And if you have something like raisins or grapes in the car on a journey, then you could encourage them to share those with somebody, to find half, to find a quarter of those, to make it fair, to make those parts equal. Now it's really important to link half and quarter with time. And in year 1, children will be introduced to the concept of time and looking at o'clock first and then half past. And in year 2, they'll look at o'clock, half past, quarter past and quarter to. So when you have a look at a clock, think about how you can break it up into quarters, and how when you do that, a quarter past is when the long minute hand is on the number 3, and when it's quarter to, the long minute hand is on the number 9. And you can link that concept with things like turns. So on a trampoline, can they do a quarter turn? What are they looking at when they do that? Can they make another quarter turn, another quarter turn, another quarter turn, so they're back to the beginning? Working with that is card 50. So if we're on a trampoline on the playground and we're thinking about clockwise and anti-clockwise, we can spin on apparatus, or we can turn on the trampoline clockwise, like the hands turn on a clock, and anti-clockwise, going the opposite way. I really hope this session's been useful for you. If you've got any questions at all, please feel free to contact me on nicola@happyhomelearning.co.uk via email. And you can find me on Happy Home Learning UK on Facebook and on Instagram. I'd absolutely love to hear what you found most useful as well about these video tutorials, and maybe which are the most popular activity cards with your child. And I really hope that this resource has made learning easier, more active and fun for you.